doesn't work out, and who knows what happened to Quintero. And now I wish we had Christian Ramirez under contract through 2021. That would have been all right. But
yeah. And so now on that subject, in terms of value, I've seen it a few times, especially today, where some people have argued Christian Ramirez was undervalued. And the argument that I saw actually last night, now that I think about it, was, well, Christian just went for $800,000, maybe $1 million. But you've got players like Joseph Martinez and Giovinco and Dos Santos and David Villa, who went for millions.
Right.
It's like, how is Ramirez not at least closer to them? And the reality is that people don't understand the allocation money.
Yeah.
The fact is, and I had tweeted this to Jeff Reuter at the Athletic to make sure I wasn't completely out of line, and he thankfully responded to me and said I was right. It's a reality that allocation money has an existential value. Like, it's just because it's $1 million doesn't mean that means he's worth $1 million transfer fee.
Right.
It's the existential value to what you can do with allocation money says $1 million is probably more like, depending on how you use it, could be anything from like 2.5 to 3-4 million if you use it properly.
Yeah, it could be even more invaluable than that. I think, I mean, you look at the salary cap for MLS is just over 5 million, or actually it's just over 4 million, and you have teams like Toronto who are spending upwards of 26 million. I think they're the tops by far, but they can't spend that kind of money without the allocation money. Right. Obviously, a large part of that is their 3 designated players that don't count against that hit. Well, it does count against the hit. It counts as just over $500,000 against that 4 million cap. So, yeah, the bottom line is that allocation money can give you so much maneuvering room to play with your salary cap. And so it could be extremely valuable.
Yeah, so it really ends up going back to, we're not going to be able to grade this transaction for a couple of years. I mean, unless, of course, tomorrow we find out, because there is that rumor that we're in the market for a out-of-contract international midfielder who can be signed at any time because he's out of contract.
He's out. I was going to bring up the fact that now, because the transfer window had closed, they can announce an upcoming transfer, assuming the paperwork's been filed, but he cannot be put on the roster until they get their transfer certificate, which can only happen in the windows. But now, are you saying because he's not with a club?
Right.
Okay.
So, for instance, the name that's been flying around on Twitter, which I would actually agree with, is Jack Rodwell. He's from Everton. He's been, started with Everton, I should say. He's been on a contract now since the end of the season, last season. And so he's just sitting around. Because he's out of contract, he doesn't fall under the transfer rules. Okay. So, yeah, he can be signed and start tomorrow.
Okay. Well,
but now he has to be signed, any player has to be signed, I saw the date, I want to say it's like September 10th or something
before
like that.
the final rosters are set going into the end of the season leading into the MLS Cup. Yep. Yeah, it's the roster freeze date.
Yeah.
Whatever you want
so
to
as long as they sign someone by then, if they're out of contract, then they circumvent all those transfer window rules, and they can, as long as it's before that date, then they're good to go.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and now that we're talking about it here on the pod, I think that is just the source of the outrage now. I mean, just because, as far as I was concerned, when I first read it, it sounds like they're trading him for maybe $1 million, which is that would sting tremendously because that's, you're not getting the value in return. But so as soon as this happened, I had to actually go online and I downloaded the MLS roster rules and regulations 2018, and it's a 24-page basically booklet that goes through all the rules and regulations. Specifically, I was interested in that allocation money and for the points that you had brought up with what you can do with it. It's not cash,
right?
In that sense of the word. So,
yeah. And the fact that we just paid $50,000 to Colorado for an international spot is a really good example of how it's more valuable than $50,000,
right?
Because we now had room for our DP to come onto the roster.
Yeah.
And, if, for instance, we're looking at this other international midfielder, then clearly we're going to be looking for someone else's international spot.
Yeah.
And so, again, it's more valuable. I mean, if that player ends up being, if they sign this player, whoever it is, and they end up being an impactful player, then that $50,000 or $75,000 that we ended up paying for an international spot is worth way more than that amount.
And that's why somebody, because the other major sports don't work that way. And that's why when on page 2 of that rules and regulations book that I downloaded, when I saw that the salary cap, the total salary budget of the team was only $4 million, it just made me scratch my head because I was like, well, how is that even possible? It doesn't make sense.
Right.
When you just read that, until you read into the details of how this money works, you can start to understand it. Because then, with the the ticket sales, merchandise sales, and everything else, all the income streams for these franchises, a lot of the owners have no problem spending in the I saw it, 20s of millions, 10s of millions. The Loons going into this year were at about $8 million.
Is that really
total salary? So the owners don't have problems spending more money, but because they're limited with that base salary, they have to get creative in how they pay for these players and use their allocation money. So it's actually kind of interesting. It's not simple, but interesting.
Yeah, I agree. It is. So, here we are. The transfer window closed last night, and they haven't, at least at this point, for this transfer window, spent any of that money, which I know I saw a few people were pretty upset about that. And it's like, I have a feeling that we're going to have a tense relationship with our front office.
I agree,
for the next few months.
Because my first reaction to that was, well, the transfer window closes in 2.5 days. How are they going to, what are they going to get done? Right. They better get something done to make this worthwhile. But fortunately, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and Adrian mentioned on, I think it was yesterday morning, that he's like, well, we're not going to sign someone, just sign someone. So, whatever that means, and on the season ticket holder call, and I think Manny even mentioned it. Might have been even on the AM 1500 interview that he had on Tuesday. That they're looking for a number 6, and they just haven't found anyone that fits what they're looking for. And a few people didn't really care about that response too much, but now that Christian's gone and we have this money coming in, people are getting a little bit more interested in, well, what in the world does what we're looking for mean? What exactly are you looking for?
Yeah.
And I've joked to a few people that it's like they're looking for Conte from Chelsea as the guy that's just going to drop into their lap, and they're going to have this, best number 6 in the world, and they're going to have the money to pay for it. And I think a lot of people are starting to feel like they don't really have a definition for what they want, or that definition is so lofty that they're not finding the player. That's creating some frustration too, And the nice thing is there are a lot of people on. I noticed on Tuesday that thought some of this money expired last night.
Initially, so did I.
Okay.
I did, and that's one of the reasons I downloaded the booklet, is just to understand, because I thought exactly that.
All right.
And I was like, well, and I thought, oh man, well, gosh, well, they'll probably let that money expire, and then they're only going to end up with $400,000 from them.
Okay,
and
so
it's very frustrating. So maybe maybe some other people out there did what I did, and maybe that's why the Twitterverse kind of settled down a little bit.
Yeah.
So
I know. I mean, I had read some of the rules before, so I knew that it didn't expire right away. But it was. I thought it was like a super irrational thought, but now that you said that, you even thought that, I was like, okay, well, maybe that's not so bad.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, you can call me irrational. That's fine. But that was my first impression. I mean, and then maybe I was thinking, they must have something in the works, and then I did my research before the window closed, so yeah. I got on board. So
yeah, well, I don't know. We've probably talked about.
Yeah, we probably have not much, but I figured maybe before we wrap it up, I thought let's bring it back to Christian Ramirez just a little bit more on a kind of a personal note, or at least specifically talking about him. And he left a really nice Instagram post. I don't know if you had a chance to read it, but I'm not going to read the whole thing. Definitely check that out if you haven't already. But just one thing he mentioned in that was, he did mention specifically, I'll quote him, I had dreams of never leaving. I never thought this day would come. It doesn't seem real. And so that's pretty raw, that comment. And that was, that happened right. And then the fans see that. I think the next day you saw pictures of him at the airport with his luggage, and it was definitely tough. But let me ask you this, and we might agree here. What's your and because I saw this thread on Twitter as well, what's your favorite Christian Ramirez moment?
I responded to this thread. I said that it was his brace against Salt Lake City last year.
Yeah.
When he chased down that ball and forced Raimondo to completely blow his composure, and he, had a free open goal.
Yep.
But then I also said that, I was in Colorado for 2014 and 2015. So I spent a lot of time streaming really bad streams of games, watching us. And so, all of that stuff, it was just, I had a lot of fun watching him play. And, even if it was sitting on my couch and, 1,200 miles away, trying to, watch a grainy video stream. I couldn't really nail it down. I picked that Salt Lake one, and I felt kind of bad picking an MLS one because, he kind of made his mark in the NASL.
Yeah.
But I think he was a fun player to watch. He was always smiling. He, like I said earlier, he always interacted with the fans. He was always there to sign autographs. Even once MLS came, he was one of the last guys, I said this earlier, to leave the pitch, and he would sign stuff for people. And I think it's hard to pin down a favorite. I think he was. I don't know if he was my favorite player. Honestly, between him and Miguel, it's very difficult to pick a favorite between the two.
It is tough, and that's part of the heartbreak that us as fans are having we feel like they're breaking up that friend, because they're best friends, and so they're breaking them up off to separate teams, and it's tough. And the video that he recorded, I believe it must have been Tuesday or Wednesday before he went to the airport, and he specifically, like you had brought up, he specifically mentioned how much he hoped he put an impression on the younger generation, the kids that would come out, because I think John's seen this firsthand. He'd spend that extra time and sign the autographs for kids and spend time. I mean, it's tough. But
what was your favorite?
I'm gonna have to go with I still like it's hard to pick a true moment, just because going back to the NASL days in 2015 and 14, 15, and 16. He was the reason I went to a lot of those games early on. I was always, a fan of the team going back to the Stars and that kind of, and that years ago. But he was the name. He was the face of the franchise, and so anything he did was special in my mind. I think I probably will have to agree with you on one of your moments that you mentioned, the 2017 RSL game.
Yeah.
Just because that